The global economy. Economic globalization. Economic globalization refers to the increasing interdependence of world economies as a result of the growing scale of cross-border trade of commodities and services, the flow of international capital, and the wide and rapid spread of technologies. It reflects the continuing expansion and mutual integration of market frontiers and is an irreversible trend for the economic development in the entire world at the turn of the millennium. The rapidly growing significance of information in all types of productive activities and marketization are the two major driving forces for economic globalization. In other words, the fast globalization of the world's economies in recent years is largely based on the rapid development of science and technology that has resulted from the environment in which market economic system has been fast spreading throughout the world and developed based on increasing cross-border division of labor that has been penetrating down to the level of production chains within the enterprises of different countries, capital, and the wide and rapid spread of technologies. It reflects the continuing expansion and mutual integration of market frontiers and is an irreversible trend for the economic. Economic globalization is the growing global integration of markets and systems of finance, commerce, communication, technology, and law that bypass traditional national, cultural, ethnic, and social boundaries. The proponents of economic globalization argued that it leads to an efficient division of labor, remarkable specialization, increased productivity, high standards of living and wealth, and end of poverty. Proponents also argued that recent economic growth has significantly contributed to the high standard of living that is enjoyed by many within the developed world and raised the living standards of many people that are formerly living in abject poverty. However, many people have not made such gains. Benefits of economic globalization. Foreign direct investment FDI tends to increase at a much greater rate than the growth in world trade, thereby boosting technology transfer, industrial restructuring, and the growth of global companies. Technological innovation increased competition from globalization stimulates new technology development, particularly with the growth in FDI, which improves the economic output by making processes efficient. Economies of scale. Globalization enables large companies to realize economies of scale that reduce costs and prices, which in turn supports further economic growth. However, this phenomenon can hurt many small businesses attempting to compete domestically. Telecommunication. Economic globalization has been expanding since the emergence of transnational trade due to improvements in the efficiency of long-distance transportation, advances in telecommunication, the importance of information instead of physical capital in the modern economy, and developments in science and technology. Defining economic globalization. Economic globalization refers to the widespread international movement of goods, capital, services, technology, and information. Economic globalization refers to the increasing interdependence of world economies as a result of the growing scale of cross-border trade of commodities and services, the flow of international capital, and the wide and rapid spread of technologies. Actors that facilitate economic globalization. Acting in the globalized world due to the increased liberalization of markets, especially socio-economic reforms, is a necessary condition for the realization of the full impact of globalization. The actors that facilitate economic globalization are the following. International economic and financial organizations. They provide structure and funding for many unilateral and multilateral development projects. Such organizations deal with the major economic and political issues facing domestic societies and the international community as a whole. The activities of these organizations promote sustainable private and public sector developments mainly by financing the projects of the private sector in developing countries, helping private companies mobilize financing in international financial markets, and providing advice and technical assistance to businesses and government. International governmental organizations. EGOs have international membership, scope, and presence. Their primary members consist of sovereign states. These organizations bring member states together to cooperate on a particular theme or issues that have global impacts and implications, such as human rights, trade, development, poverty, gender, and migration. International governmental organizations. EGOs have international membership, scope, and presence. Their primary members consist of sovereign states. These organizations bring member states together to cooperate on a particular theme or issues that have global impacts and implications, such as human rights, trade, development, poverty, gender, and migration. That have global impacts and implications, such as human rights, trade, development, poverty, gender, and migration. Multilateral development banks. Multilateral development banks are international financial institutions that are owned by countries. The four regional multilateral development banks are the Inter-American Development Bank, the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. These institutions provide loans, grants, guarantees, private equity, and technical assistance to public and private sector projects in developing countries. Nation-states. Nation-states refers to a form of state that derives its political legitimacy from serving as a sovereign entity for a nation. Within its sovereign territorial space, the state is a political and geopolitical entity, whereas a nation is a cultural and/or ethnic entity. The term nation-state indicates that the two geographically coincide, and this distinguishes the nation-states from the other types of state that preceded it. Non-governmental organizations. NGOs. NGO refers to a legally constituted organization that is created with no participation or representation of any government and driven. These organizations are task-oriented and perform a variety of service and humanitarian functions. Some organizations revolve around specific issues, such as human rights, environment, gender, and health. In many jurisdictions, these types of organizations are called civil society organizations. Transnational corporations. Transnational corporations exert considerable power in the globalized world economy. Many corporations are richer and more powerful than the states that seek to regulate them. Through mergers and acquisitions, corporations have been growing rapidly. Some of the largest now have annual profits exceeding the GDPs of many low and medium income countries. We should explore how individuals dominate the global economy and exert their influence over global policymaking. Actors that facilitate economic globalization. 1. International economic and financial organizations. International Monetary Fund, Bank for International Settlements, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. 2. EGOS, World Trade Organization, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, International Organization for Migration. 3. Multilateral development banks. Inter-American Development Bank, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, African Development Bank, Asian Development, World Bank. 4. Nation-states. International Country Development Agencies, Nordic Council. 5. NGOs, International Crisis Group, Population Council, Social Watch. 6. Transnational corporations, export processing zones, foreign direct investments. Modern world system. Emanuel Wallerstein created a huge stir in the 1970s with the publication of the book entitled The Modern World System, Capitalist Agriculture and the Origins of the European World Economy in the 16th Century. In 1974. The book is an intellectual masterpiece, synthesizing a vast range of fundamental literature on the economic history of Europe and the world. The concept of world system is a key component of our current understanding of globalization, that is, it captures the idea of causal interconnectedness across the globe among major organizations, firms, populations, and states. The world systems theory was developed by Emanuel Wallerstein. Wallerstein 1976 asserted that a world system is a social system that has boundaries, structures, member groups, rules of legitimation, and coherence. Its life is made up of the conflicting forces that hold it together by tension and tear it apart as each group to remold it to its advantage. This world system has the characteristics of an organism and a lifespan over which its characteristics change in some aspects and remain stable in others. Life within this theory is mainly self-contained, and the dynamics of its development are essentially internal. In other words, Wallerstein is referring to a world system wherein the economic systems of all countries worldwide are interconnected. In this economic system, some countries benefit, while others take advantage of. Therefore, this theory is an illustration of worldwide inequality among nation-states. The world economy is held together by An international market instead of a political center wherein two or more regions are interdependent for necessities, such as food security. Wallerstein added that in this system, more than two polities will always compete for domination, but none will emerge as a constant center indefinitely. Wallerstein argued that this world system is established on a three-level hierarchy. While this theory explains how globalization takes place in this world system, it also explains inequality among different countries that are identified in this three-level hierarchy. This hierarchy also shows how economic, cultural, and political powers are distributed spatially across the world. Wallerstein described the characteristics of these different countries. Tripartite world system. Wallerstein's world system divides the nations and areas of the world into three units, that is, core, peripheral, and semi-peripheral. These normative units are systemic and relational. Within the capitalist world economy, all parts of the system are dependent upon and interact with each other. Any change in the system will affect the system. 1. Core states. Core states are economically developed and wealthy states by nature capitalist that exploit peripheral countries. They are characterized by fully developed economic and political institutions, advanced technology, a strong education system, and strong financial and military power. They also have powerful alliances worldwide. Given that core countries are wealthy, they can invest in types of machinery and state-of-the-art technologies that enable them to reproduce the commodities they export and sell to weak countries. Core states dominate the economic structure of their historical time and strive to maintain or expand this authority. One fundamental element of a core nation is the ability to produce and distribute products. Another characteristic of a core state is strong state machinery that is linked to a unified national culture. The state supports economic influence wielded by private business people, merchants, and financial institutions, which play a vital role in core nations. Culture often serves as an ideological justification for dominance. The state also provides the military force to protect and expand economic interests. Contemporary core nations dominate high technology, financial institutions, and high-profit industries. Scholars argue that core countries do not always retain this position in the world system. The examples of core states are the United States of America, Great Britain, Japan, France, and Germany. 2. Peripheral states. Peripheral states are often dominated and exploited by core countries for their human resources and raw materials because the former is dependent on capital on the latter. Peripheral state economies are characterized by primary economic activities, natural resources, and raw materials. In general, periphery countries are economically unstable and weak. The common economic activities of peripheral states are mostly agriculture, mining, forestry, etc. The majority of peripheral states also experience brain drain or the movement of a highly trained, skilled workforce of peripheral states to developed countries because of the lack of employment opportunities. Peripheral states are economically and politically weak. Peripheral countries have previously been colonies of core countries. These countries' political and economic structures were established according to designs that are beneficial to the colonizing country. Examples of these countries are Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and East Timor. 3. Semi-peripheral states. The semi-peripheral states share the characteristics of the core and peripheral states. Scholars identified semi-peripheral states as previously core states that have deteriorated or peripheral countries that are exerting effort to improve their place in the world system. This theory argues that semi-peripheral states are important elements in the world economy. These states also serve as buffers between core and peripheral states. Given that semi-peripheral states are generally industrialized, they are responsible for the manufacture and export of goods. Examples of these countries are Brazil, India, South Africa, Mexico, Indonesia, and Malaysia. The relationship between the three types of states explains how inequality is institutionalized in this system. Scholars argue that some states deliberately exploit economically weaker states than them to make themselves core states, thereby establishing a three-tiered hierarchy of these states in the international system. Similarities of world systems analysis and globalization. 1. Both approaches are multisectoral with a focus on the economy. Both aspire to describe macrosocial changes as a whole based upon a materialist understanding of social change. 2. Both approaches place the state at the center stage in their analysis to downgrade it as an analytical world systems analysis or political category globalization. 3. Neither approach proposes a multisectoral alternative organization nexus to the state, but both relate marginally to the literature on world cities. WST. The WST was developed by Emanuel Wallerstein. Wallerstein 1976 asserted that a world system is a social system that has boundaries, structures, member groups, rules of legitimation, and coherence. Wallerstein refers to a world system wherein the economic systems of countries worldwide are interconnected. In this economic system, several countries benefit, while others take advantage of. Therefore, the WST is an illustration of worldwide inequality among nation-states. It consists of the three-level hierarchy that is known as the tripartite world system, as follows. 1. Core states within the context of the world system. Core nations compete among themselves for economic advantage. 2. Peripheral states. Peripheral states are dependent upon core nations and have been a source of conflict between core nations. 3. Semi-peripheral states. These states serve as intermediate trading areas between the core and peripheral nations. Global economic integration. Economic integration is an arrangement among nations that typically includes the reduction or elimination of trade barriers and the coordination of monetary and fiscal policies. Economic integration aims to reduce costs for consumers and producers and increase trade between the countries that are involved in the agreement. Economic integration is occasionally referred to as regional integration because it often occurs among neighboring nations. Advantages of global economic integration. The advantages of economic integration fall into three categories, that is, trade benefits, employment, and political cooperation. Economic integration typically leads to a reduction in the cost of trade, improved availability and a wide selection of goods and services, and increased efficiency that leads to increased purchasing power. Employment opportunities tend to improve because trade liberalization leads to market expansion, technology sharing, and cross-border investment. Political cooperation among countries can also improve because of strong economic ties, which provides an incentive to resolve conflicts peacefully and leads to stability. The next videos is to understand more in global economy.
Apex Brazil presents Foreign Direct Investment. Brazil is the largest recipient of foreign direct investment in Latin America. But do you know what foreign direct investment is? It is the long-term investment in a foreign country. Robert works in a multinational company that produces microchips for smartphones. The firm is based in Europe, with factories in Asia and the United States, from where their products are exported to Brazil. Robert is responsible for the opening of subsidiaries to expand the company's global presence. Apex Brazil detected that Robert's company has technologies that would help the development of the Brazilian productive chain in the electronics industry. Apex Brazil contacted him to present investment opportunities in Brazil and the incentives that are available to facilitate the company's production in the country. Like the company where Robert works, several other foreign companies find in Brazil excellent opportunities for investment in sectors such as energy, infrastructure, automotive, medical equipment, semiconductors and biotechnology, among others. Companies also find a favorable business environment for investment, with a growing consumer market, abundant natural resources, skilled workforce, a stable democracy, and legal environment. Robert understands this potential and is currently evaluating the best way to invest in Brazil. Some options are considered for the country: the construction of a new industrial plant, the merger or acquisition of a company already operating in Brazil, or a partnership with a local company to offer their products and services in the Brazilian market. Robert decides to visit the country. Apex Brazil offers free support to build relationships with governments, organizations, and companies in all regions of the country. Investors then gain a clearer view of the market, available infrastructure, potential partners, costs, taxations, labor availability, logistics, and compliance to Brazilian norms and regulations. In addition, they have the chance to negotiate incentives and a strategic location for the plant. After Robert's trip to the country, the company decided to invest. Good for them and for Brazil. Foreign direct investment brings new technologies, improves the trade flow and the infrastructure, takes the country to global value chains, generates employment and taxes, and stimulates workforce qualification, helping Brazil to grow. Apex Brazil, promoting investments for Brazil's growth.
Technological innovation is an extended concept of innovation. While innovation is a rather well-defined concept, it has a broad meaning to many people, and especially numerous understanding in the academic and business world. Innovation refers to adding extra steps of developing new services and products in the marketplace or in the public that fulfill unaddressed needs or solve problems that were not in the past. Technological innovation, however, focuses on the technological aspects of a product or service rather than covering the entire organization business model. It is important to clarify that innovation is not only driven by technology. Technological innovation is the process where an organization or a group of people working outside a structured organization embarks in a journey where the importance of technology as a source of innovation has been identified as a critical success factor for increased market competitiveness. The wording technological innovation is preferred to technology innovation. Technology innovation gives a sense of working on technology for the sake of technology. Technological innovation better reflects the business consideration of improving business value by working on technological aspects of the product or services. Moreover, in a vast majority of products and services, there is not one unique technology at the heart of the system. It is the combination, the integration and interaction of different technologies that make the product or service successful.
What are economies of scale? This mini-lesson briefly explains and looks at some of their advantages. Economies of scale is a term used to describe certain benefits that a business gains from increasing levels of production. These include what are known as technical, specialization, and purchasing economies. The idea of economies of scale is about more than the simple idea that higher sales leads to higher profits. It's about changing the level of output so that certain cost savings or economies can be made. Take an extreme example. Supposing that you decide to set up your own company producing smartphones in your garage. Would you be able to compete with existing manufacturers such as Apple and Samsung? Could you make a profit from selling your phones at the same price as those made by these giant companies? You'd almost certainly find that the unit cost of production, marketing budget, and expertise of Apple and Samsung would make it very difficult to get consumers interested in buying your products. Let's quickly look at what we mean by technical specialization and purchasing economies of scale. First of all, technical economies. Larger firms can make savings through investing in bigger and more cost-effective machinery and equipment. For example, sophisticated IT systems to collate and process data can be a way to improve efficiency. However, this technology is probably only affordable to businesses operating on a certain scale. Mass production techniques involving high levels of automation can improve labor productivity. For example, the use of robots in manufacturing. Once again though, only businesses that have reached a certain size will be able to justify purchasing this type of expensive machinery. Better and bigger transport methods can reduce distribution costs per unit, so a larger business with bigger sales might make deliveries with a lorry instead of a van. This will produce cost savings. It will reduce the number of trips needed and the amount of labour needed to deliver goods. Specialisation economies. As a firm becomes larger, it's more able to obtain the advantage of division of labour. This means that a worker can concentrate on one kind of job instead of having to do a range of quite different jobs. This allows the worker to become more skilled and quicker at that specific task. This in turn will reduce labour cost per unit produced. For example, consider Joe, a small independent retailer who owns one shop. As well as dealing with customers, Joe spends time on a wide range of other tasks. These include negotiating with suppliers, arranging delivery, promoting the business, and keeping financial records. If the business could grow and operate, say, 4 or 5 shops, then Joe might be able to justify employing an accounts clerk. This is something that the profits from one shop probably could not support. But the clerk could maintain financial records, arrange for the payment of suppliers and staff, and so on. An accounts clerk will be more efficient than Joe when it comes to doing this work. This is because she does it all the time, whereas the small-scale entrepreneur like Joe only does it some of the time. A clerk also has a more detailed understanding of how to set up the right kind of financial records. The same principles apply to employing other specialists, such as marketing managers and production engineers. Purchasing economies. Large firms can buy raw materials and other inputs in greater bulk. Suppliers will be keen to offer price discounts to those businesses that they see as big customers. Not only that, the managers of a business that has been around for a time will manage costs better. The managers have learnt from experience. What are the advantages of economies of scale? Firstly, lower unit costs. Achieving economies of scale is important because this enables a business to reduce its unit costs. This gives the business 2 options. It can offer customers a reduced price, or it could keep prices the same and accept a better profit margin. Secondly, barriers to entry. What are barriers to entry? Very large businesses are able to deter other businesses from entering the market in the short run. As discussed earlier, it's difficult for a startup to directly compete in mass markets with businesses such as Kellogg's, breakfast cereals, Microsoft, computer operating systems, and Johnson & Johnson, pharmaceuticals, because of their sheer scale. For instance, where threats to the dominance of large companies like this emerge, a price war may break out. A large company is more likely to win a price war than a small business with much less capital and much higher unit costs. So, to sum up, economies of scale are the cost advantages that businesses obtain as they increase their size. Examples of economies of scale include technical, specialization, and purchasing. The advantages of economies of scale include lower unit costs and barriers to entry. You might like to try this question. A Limited manufactures dry dog food. The business has grown rapidly and the directors are now seeking to build a new, much bigger factory. Briefly explain how A Limited might obtain purchasing, technical and specialization economies of scale. To find out more, visit learnloads.com.
Telecommunication is the transmission of signs, signals, messages, words, writings, images and sounds or information of any nature by wire, radio, optical or electromagnetic systems. Telecommunication occurs when the exchange of information between communication participants includes the use of technology. It is transmitted either electrically over physical media, such as cables, or via electromagnetic radiation. Such transmission paths are often divided into communication channels which afford the advantages of multiplexing. Since the Latin term communicatio is considered the social process of information exchange, the term telecommunications is often used in its plural form because it involves many different technologies. Early means of communicating over a distance included visual signals, such as beacons, smoke signals, semaphore telegraphs, signal flags, and optical heliographs. Other examples of pre-modern long-distance communication included audio messages such as coded drum beats, long-blown horns, and loud whistles. 20th and 21st century technologies for long-distance communication usually involve electrical and electromagnetic technologies, such as telegraph, telephone, and teleprinter networks, radio, microwave transmission, fiber optics, and communications satellites. The revolution in wireless communication began in the first decade of the 20th century with the pioneering developments in radio communications by Guglielmo Marconi, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1909, and other notable pioneering inventors and developers in the field of electrical and electronic telecommunications. These included Charles Wheatstone and Samuel Morse, inventors of the telegraph; Alexander Graham Bell, inventor of the telephone; Edwin Armstrong and Lee De Forest, inventors of radio, as well as Vladimir K. Zworykin, John Logie Baird, and Philo Farnsworth, some of the inventors of television.
using Powtoon.
So what is a modern world system? Whoa, we probably have to talk about what is a system first. Systems have three parts: inputs, processes, and outputs. Every system has these three parts. At the simplest level, we often think about systems in our household, like the electrical system. We use it every day, but we hardly think about it. Many of the features are common to all systems. At one end, we put in energy from fossil fuels and solar fuels. The other end, we get heat and entertainment. In the same way, social systems have the same inputs and outputs. We put in work, we get money. We put in money, we get that iPod we wanted. At the national level, we send goods for export, we get back imports. This is the world systems. There are four major world systems: tribute-taking, imperialism, colonialization, and globalization. Tribute-taking took place in ancient civilizations. Countries would invade and take what they needed. Imperialism, however, meant countries invaded but set up trade systems, sharing some of the profits with the new countries. The next phase was colonization, where those countries would then put settlers in there and create their own new societies in those civilizations. Lastly, we have globalization. Globalization is where multinational countries set up in these areas and set up their own profit making within the countries. They then send these profits back home. The system worked for as long as inputs and outputs continued. However, the system of imperialism would collapse if inputs like troops were consumed by European war and a rebellion took place in the colonies. Despite this, the modern system worked for centuries. Payment.
Economic integration reduces or eliminates trade barriers among nations and coordinates monetary and fiscal policies. The aim is to reduce costs for consumers and producers, as well as to increase trade between the countries participating in the agreement. The more integrated economies become, the fewer trade barriers exist, and the more politically coordinated they are. Countries can agree to different levels of economic integration. A preferential trade agreement is a trading bloc where members reduce or remove tariffs on certain goods imported and exported throughout their region. A free trade area is a bloc in which countries reduce or remove tariffs on all goods among member nations. An example is the North American Free Trade Agreement. In a customs union, member countries reduce or remove tariffs among themselves and impose a common tariff against non-member countries. Countries involved in a common markets bloc freely exchange all goods, services, labor, and capital. An economic union is a common markets bloc among members that also share one trade policy with non-members. And in a monetary union, nations share a single currency such as the euro. The good thing about economic integration is its members pay smaller expenses to trade, which can spur economic growth. But one member of a bloc can bring others down if its economy or growth slows. The more integrated the economies become, the less flexibility the governments of member nations have to make adjustments that would benefit themselves.
Thanks for watching.